Hello, everybody. It's Gerry Scott here, your host of the Snowbird US Day Tracker podcast. I'm sorry, it's called the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast. We get that wrong all the time. We're getting so excited about the app because we're seeing record numbers being downloaded, Mike. I think we had 700 last month, and I think for the month of April, we've got about 600. So people are finding great use of this app. But today we wanted to take advantage of, we had an election on Monday. Today is Wednesday. Mike has become a real celebrity with CNN. He's been a lot of controversy about Canada becoming the 51st state, and Mike's popularity with his Toronto Mike podcast in Toronto. I thought we would take this opportunity to talk about the election, and our intent, the takeaway from this podcast is we know hockey games can unite the country, but we got to find other ways to unite us as families that live in Vancouver and families that live in St. John's and Toronto and Montreal, right across this beautiful country of ours. So Mike, give me an update on your celebrity status with CNN these days.
Well, Gerry, it's a pleasure to be back in the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast studio. See, I got that name perfect.
Oh, you sure did. Well, you're the one that created the name. So
I want you to write it like a cue card. Like, you know, when Johnny Carson would do his monologue, you need a cue card with the name on it. You'll never get it wrong again.
Well, you're assuming I can read and write.
So thank you for that great introduction. I have become the Canadian correspondent for CNN's This Morning show with Audie Cornish. And I was on to talk about the Trump threats to make us the 51st state and the tariffs. And then I returned to CNN just the Monday, the election day, April 28th, the Monday. I was back on CNN to tell Americans what we're up to over here.
Well, you know, Mike, as I have so many friends in Eastern Canada, and I know that the country is red, and out here in the West it's blue, outside of the Trump, and we can cover that. We won't allocate a lot of time for that because that is a very, very sensitive for a lot of us Canadians. And even as much time I spend in the States, and I have a lot of wonderful families that we spend time with in the States, and this is not United States against Canada. This is really an administration that's really trying to shake up trade, and I think this is working against the American people. But let's really talk about, I'm going to share with you my process when it came to voting this year. And hopefully all the viewers don't start to can our shows or fire us or ask for a new host based on my strong political views. And I'm going to tell people I'm coming from a centered position. If whatever my views are, I believe less government, less taxes. But at this stage in life, I believe that we should all be, at least my opinion and what I've matured to be as a Canadian, is someone who is very centered, believing that I'm not going to argue for the right or for the left. I just believe that we should be socially responsible and we should be very charitable at this stage in our life. That's my opinion. I don't know if my wife shares it all the time, but I'm trying to educate her on being a very centered person. But the process I went through, and we were hoping to have Mike Harcourt on the podcast today and talk about tariffs, and unfortunately, Mike and Becky have a new iPhone and they're having a hard time clicking on the Riverside link to get him into the podcast. But our intentions were to talk about tariffs, and we'll do that down the road with Mike. He's a very dear friend, and I respect his views. And he's got so much knowledge being a premier of the province from 1991 to 1996. He was also mayor of Vancouver 1980 to 1986. And he was also very heavily involved with the World Fair in 1986. I saw Mike on TV all the time with Jimmy Pattison, and there was a lot of union problems they were having. But anyhow, Mike is one of the resources, as I call friends, that help me with my seeing more than just my political views and what's best for the country rather than what's best for the Scott family. I have that resource I reached out to, and Mike was very informative. And and talk me through his views on, may it be the the Conservatives with Polyev, sadly, who didn't even win his seat, and of course Mark Carney, who's with the Liberal Party, and I mistakenly call him Art Carney every once in a while, who was Norton on the Honeymooners, I believe.
Of course.
And there's another resource as well, Mike. I have a brother-in-law who's a very, very business person in the pharmacy business. He's now retired. It's been very, very, he's another conservative that shed some pretty good light on who would be the best person to allow Canada to manage this global crisis with the U.S. administration. So at the end of the day, I went with the industry vote. I am a conservative, but I honestly thought that Mr. Carney, Mark Carney, would be the best person to lead us into this. So, but it was very different, and I always wonder, and I'll ask you for your opinion as well.
Sure.
Why is there such a split with red being Eastern Canada and blue being out here in the West? What is your view, Mike?
I was going to ask you, what exactly is it like in Vancouver? Because I know in Toronto, where I live, it's extremely red. That means it's extremely liberal. Since 2015, almost every single election, the whole city goes red. I think we had one exception this year. But I know, for example, Quebec and out east, that it's awfully red. And then I know once you start working west, I know it's very, very blue, especially in Alberta and Saskatchewan. But what can you tell me? What is the makeup in the greater Vancouver area? Like, is it a split? What's going on there?
I'd have to ask a kindergarten child what happens when you take red dye and you put it in with blue dye. Does it become purple?
Yes, it does, I think.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you that it's purple.
Okay.
I think there's a real split between, I think, the amount of seats. I think we have maybe, and I'm not this political hound that people think I am, but I think we have about 45 seats in the province.
Okay.
And I believe that it's purple, it's blue, it's red.
What about Vancouver? Because when you're in rural, tough to say that word, Gerry. When you're in rural Ontario, it gets very blue. Like, it's the cities that are red, like Ottawa, which, like you said, Pierre Poilievre lost his seat in Ottawa there. So Ottawa, Toronto particularly, these urban centers go liberal. But what does Vancouver do?
Once
I'm putting
again,
you on the spot, aren't I? Okay. Well,
you know what? You're talking to this. You're talking to this centered political person who's
Right.
afraid of offending anybody. So I would say, I really would say that we are. I'm gonna say that we are. I think there's a combination.
So my understanding is, again, I am a CNN correspondent, so I'm very educated in these manners, Gerry, but I believe it's not so much east and west as it is urban versus rural. Can you say rural? Say it for me.
Rural.
That's why you're the host of the show. Okay. So I understand that in big cities, and Toronto's a big city, Montreal's a big city, Vancouver's a big city, in the bigger cities, you are far more left of center, and I think a great deal of that has to do with social issues, like, for example, LGBTQ rights and with the trans community and safe injection and mental health issues, and not that in Canada it's even a subject, but things like abortion and all these social issues, you're extremely progressive when you're in the big cities, and then it's less so and more conservative and more religious as you go into the rural areas.
Well, maybe it really comes down to the fact that if you talk to, we can talk about, in the rural areas, like what is the big issue. But I think one of the problems we have is that maybe we're not feeling the love, and maybe we should have had a person from Calgary, because the province is, Alberta is so blue.
Right.
So I think it really comes down to Like seriously, when people talk about, what unites Canada,
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I've been a proud Canadian for so many years, but people have to remind me. Yes, we have independence, we have great education, we have great health care, but we spend a lot of time in Maui, and I see a lot of great health care over there. Yes, we have to pay for it, but man, I didn't have to wait for it.
I
So
think, yeah. Sorry, Jerry, for interrupting. Keep going.
no, you go. I'm just trying to. I've got so many screens open
I
on my
think,
computer.
Jerry, I think it is a very divided country. And I think you could probably, again, we're not talking about Trump and we're not talking about the United States today, but I think they're in a similar boat where it's like you're a blue state or a red state, and the two have trouble even communicating. It's like they're having trouble agreeing, is water wet? Is the sky blue? It's become this very polarizing environment. And I think in Canada, it's very similar. There are millions of Canadians who woke up Tuesday. Sorry, yeah, they woke up Tuesday, millions of Canadians, and they said, I can't believe somebody would re-elect the Liberal Party a fourth time. And there are millions of Canadians who woke up Tuesday and said, I can't believe somebody looked at Pierre Poilievre and said, that's the guy I want in charge of the country. That's the guy I want to negotiate with Donald Trump. This is how it is right now in 2025. It's like two silos, and the only thing we have in common right now, it seems, is we both silos want Canada to beat the United States in the Four Nations Cup.
Yeah, that's it. And whenever I start talking about politics, there was a great book I read called The Restless Wave, and it's the John McCain story.
Right.
And John McCain and Teddy Kennedy were best of friends. Sadly, they both died of brain cancer. But at the end of the day, they agreed to disagree on everything.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they put their country first.
So can I ask you, because you're such a sage individual, like with such wisdom, you handle our money, but you're almost like a priest and a philosopher. So I'm going to ask you, Gerry Scott, how do we get back to communicating with each other, even if we have fundamental disagreements with regards to politics and who we want to lead the country? How do we get these two silos to realize we're all Canadian and to basically talk to each other?
Well, I think, Mike, you and I have a big job to do. We could have a podcast. We could really, it's an interesting question. I think people have to realize, because we spend a lot of time in Maui, and we know that there's the people heading down south, there's less. People say it could be politically motivated, but I think it's because of the weaker Canadian dollar, and it's getting harder and harder. I think that Canadians have to start booking holidays. A British Columbian has to start booking holidays in Ontario. An Ontarian, if there is a word, they have to start booking holidays in British Columbia. We have beautiful areas like the Okanagan, Vancouver Island, oceans, mountains, and hiking, and beautiful summer weather, as does Ontario. I think people have to start to look inside themselves and realize that we have a beautiful country and start planning your holidays. Or maybe go online and start, do a home swap if things are expensive, hotels are expensive, and all this other stuff. I think we just have to kind of get back to the basics. What we think is going to be the best thing. Invest in Ontario from a holiday perspective. I think that's the only thing. And I think maybe, and with Mark Carney, I think this is on his mind. I'm sure this is being discussed amongst all the parties, is how do we unite this country? Human nature seems to be division these days. And I'm one of those guys who will sit at home and am I disappointed that Ottawa beat Toronto Maple Leafs 4-0?
Right.
And Toronto's having a hard time closing out the series. I'm going to watch the next game, and I'm hoping that Toronto, and I only say that because I think Toronto has a great chance of going on and maybe representing Canada in the East when they go up against, I think it's Florida next time, isn't it? Is that the next series to get through?
It depends on some other results, but it most likely will be Florida.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that Toronto wins. And maybe my views are different because I have a chance to, being in the industry that I do have, we have clients right across the United States, right across Canada. I have the ability to jump on a plane and fly out to Toronto and show up for Mike's 50th birthday, and leave the next afternoon. So I'm one of those guys. I look forward to Toronto. I know it's as crazy as Vancouver when it comes to trying to get around, but I enjoy it. And I hope that in the coming years as we Carney and the Liberal Party, and hopefully Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre has someone gives up a seat so he can continue to lead the Conservative Party. I hope that between those two leaders, hopefully it can be more about uniting than it is fighting in the House of Parliament.
See, I think you and I, Gerry, are a good example of what more Canadians need to do. Like, for example, you disclosed to us moments ago that you consider yourself a conservative. I've never voted conservative in my entire life, but I have so many friends who are Pierre Poilievre boosters. I know you said you voted for the Liberal Party, but I have so many friends that consider themselves conservative, and we have great chats all the time. Like, I don't consider them dead to me or like they're the devil or something, And I gotta say, it sounds like you're exactly the same way. Like, you talk to so many people across this country. Some of them are NDP supporters. Sometimes they're Green Party supporters. Many are Liberal. Many are Conservative. But you talk to these people because they're human beings and they're fellow Canadians. And I think the danger is when we stop talking to people with different political ideals than we share, and that's what gets us in trouble. And I think too many Canadians have gone down that road.
Well, we were always told that there was things you don't discuss at the dinner table. My wife is always nudging me when I start talking politics. And my views are not going to be, I'm just not that person that's able to argue against a left-wing supporter or a right-wing supporter. I just don't have those views because I've tried to learn to try and look at it right from a centered view, as mentioned. And that's kind of my approach. And I don't know if that's being a coward or a fence sitter or whatever the case is. Maybe that's not how the world runs these days. But I can't be divided. I do love to hear other people's opinions. May I be talking to Mike Harcourt, who was a NDP premier, as mentioned. I enjoy his views. I would ask Mike, rather than, I'm always looking for the truth and I'm always looking for the answer. And I'm not looking for my opinion to be forced onto everybody. So Mike, I told Mike a few years ago I was my back was sore and there was talk that I would need a back operation. And I would have to wait 2.5 years. But I could go to a private clinic and I get it done tomorrow. Or I can go down to the States and get it done tomorrow. And I told Mike, is this healthcare system broken? And Mike, very positive person, he says, no, it's being stretched. It really is being stretched. But he says, Gerry, we have enough professionals and specialists in these fields. But sadly, and this was Mike's opinion, and I treat it as a very educated opinion based on his experience, because he would have dealt with health ministers and every minister of every sector in British Columbia. He said, we have specialists, but the GPs are only referring to the top 3 or 4 people. And, because I respect Mike and I listen to, some of the Republicans' views going back to the 1980s, there was such a calming answer. Sorry about that. It's such an honest answer that I respect where it was coming from, and it was accepting. I think in today's world, in all fairness to everybody, is that sometimes the things we read or things that we hear, it's not a reliable source. So maybe, in all fairness to people, maybe that's one of the things we're having to deal with.
I would piggyback on that in final thoughts. I would say it's important everybody keep an open mind on things and continue to communicate with people of a different political stripe. And I worry that maybe we've taken on a little bit of other countries have maybe displayed what it's like when you shut it down. And I'm going to just reference something here quickly on the way out, which is that I don't know if you see these, but when I leave the city of Toronto and I go to more rural areas in Ontario, it's very common to see flags. And I won't swear on your show because we don't swear on the Snowbirds US Day Tracker expat radio podcast. We don't swear. But I'll say the word. They used to say F Trudeau, and now the new flags that I will see when I leave the city say F Carney. And I'm just here to say that's not helpful. We need to talk to each other. We need to keep an open mind, and we need to remember the tie that binds us is we're all proud Canadians and proud to be a sovereign nation. And I think that's something we can all agree on, Gerry.
Oh my gosh, Mike, you almost had a huge rant there. This is not a podcast. This is becoming a rant. I got to tell you, and I'm going to share another story with you, and I
Sure.
and I really do appreciate the fact that I want to believe in somebody. I really do, and at the same time, I remember during 2 elections ago when we had Andrew Scheer, who I saw won his seat again the other day. So congrats, Andrew. But being when Andrew Scheer was running for the Conservative Party and up against Trudeau, I had an opportunity to go for lunch with a good friend of mine, Scott Sweatman, who's a pension lawyer for Denton. He's a lifelong Liberal. He was disappointed with Trudeau the last few years, and he was all set to go blue until Mark showed up, Mark Carney. I took the time to read the book on Trudeau, Justin Trudeau. I had the chance to have James Moore at that lunch. There was just 3 of us. We went for a nice lunch. James Moore was a deputy prime minister at the time under Stephen Harper. And I was telling the guys, please share your opinion. I respect you both. I just need to know, what should I do? And I get it that all politicians make a lot of promises, and sometimes those promises they're unable to fulfill them, money, or if they're just scrambling for votes. But I just want to make sure that, so my views right now when I elect is that, more importantly, let's unite this country. Let's have strong leadership up against the current administration. And, let's make Canada, if Canada's as great as it is, we're so highly respected when we're traveling to different parts of the world. And even my time in Maui, I represent Canada very well. I'm respectful to the Hawaiian people, which a lot of them have become brothers. We use that term a lot over there. They use a term called ohana, which is family. So we're really nested in with a lot of the folks. So somewhere in the middle, Mike, is where we're going to have to meet. And I look forward to. I apologize for being optimistic. I've been optimistic my entire life, and it's served us well. That's all I'm looking for. And I told you before this, Mike and I are just winging this segment right here. We're just talking from the heart. There is no script. Half the time, there's no script in front of me. But if there's ever been a time to do a podcast with a host from Vancouver and a smart, well-respected individual like Mike in Toronto, I think we have a responsibility that whatever we can do. So if we're looking for sponsoring dollars now, reach out to Toronto Mike. We'd like to put a show together that's going to unite Canada, and we will get politicians, we'll get healthcare workers, we'll get auto workers, we'll get true Canadian hockey players and what they miss about Canada when they're in the United States. But I think we all have a responsibility. It starts with us to unite this country, and though that's our mandate. Hey, Mike, let's unite Canada.
Amen, brother.
Yes. Yes. So, other than that, anything else you want to close with? Are you praying for the Maple Leafs to close us out?
Well, Gerry, I'm a lifelong Leafs fan, which means I'm quite used to this. Like, I had to explain to my 11-year-old last night. He was quite upset, my 11-year-old, and he was telling me, Dad, if we don't win in Ottawa, we have to go to a game 7. And he looked kind of upset. And I said, Jarvis, let me tell you something. Welcome to Leaf Fanville. This is how we roll, and we have a very difficult time closing out series. We've only had one win in the last, I think, 14 or 15 chances to close out a series. So expect a game 7. Expect it to be very anxious, and then expect to lose on some bad bounce late in the third period. But you know what? Life goes on. Let's enjoy it while we have it, and maybe we'll get lucky this time and make it to the second round.
Okay, I'll close with 2 remarks. One, I heard that the last time the Toronto Maple Leafs won a 5-game series was 1963, and I did hear a cute joke. Okay, so anyhow, these 2 Canadians, they die and they go to hell, and the devil greets them, and he says, "Welcome to hell." And these Canadians are saying, this is kind of a Snowbird joke. The Canadians are saying, "Well, we're going to love it here. It's nice and toasty." And the devil was so upset. He was so upset that he went back and all the people that helped run hell, he says, "Listen, we got a couple of Canadians that just showed up. We need to crank up the heat." Well, sure enough, they crank up the heat, and the devil sees all these other people complaining that it's too hot here. And those damn Canadians are having a barbecue. And they're thanking the devil, saying, "This is so much. The warm, we get the barbecue every day of the year. This is incredible." So anyhow, the devil goes back and he says, "That's it. We need to turn down the heat." Now he turns down the heat, and he sees everybody else, and they're complaining that it's too damn cold down here in hell. And there you have those Canadians, and they're so excited. And the devil says, "What are you so excited about?" He says, "It's freezing." And these Canadians said, "You know what? If it's freezing in hell and it's froze over, the Toronto Maple Leafs have probably won the Stanley Cup." So there you are. That was a cute joke that I heard today. But Mike, I thank you for your friendship. I thank you for educating me on Toronto and becoming a big fan of Eastern Canada. So let's do this more often, where we can really unite the Eastern, and regardless if people are disappointed that the Liberals got in again, I am optimistic and hopeful, whoever got in, that they would be in a position to unite Canada and put us in a better position than we have been the last 10 years. So on those notes, I will hold back the tears, and I will be optimistic, and I will hope for the best.